When people think about working in the software engineering field, they typically think about FAANG and various unicorn companies. And these companies are obviously very great. They offer awesome compensation packages, great benefits, a wide variety of connections. But startups also have their own set of perks that you may not realize. And that's why I'm going to go over 6 pros of working as a software engineer at a startup. Pro number 1 is you have the opportunity to build things from the ground up. Joining a startup means that everyone at the company is likely very new, and whatever product you're going to be building is likely in its infancy stage. And trust me, this is a huge pro, especially if you're just starting out in your career, because you will essentially just be getting paid to learn. At bigger companies, if you're a newcomer, you're likely not going to be put on a team that's doing something completely new. Your team will likely start you off pretty slow, picking up bug tickets here and there, maybe implementing very small features, and this process could go on for potentially a very long time. But as for a small company, you're likely just going to be thrown into deep water and told to, implement this big feature, and you have to do it to the best of your ability. And don't get me wrong, this can be a bad thing in certain situations if you have, absolutely no guidance. But in the right setting, it actually can be better for your career because you will be able to learn a bunch of different things at a more rapid pace. Pro number 2 is you have the chance to wear many hats. A startup likely isn't going to have the amount of funds to hire every single possible role in a typical engineering org. Think of how many roles there are in a typical engineering organization. There's front-end engineers, back-end engineers, mobile engineers, DevOps, QA engineers, project managers. I'm sure I'm forgetting some, but the list goes on and on. A startup isn't going to be able to afford to hire all of these people, and this is where you might have to take on the role of multiple people. This can be beneficial if you can learn things quickly because you'll get to dive into roles that you may not have otherwise if you worked at a bigger company. At my old job, I worked at a startup that eventually grew to a mid-sized company, and I was hired right out of college as a back-end engineer. But over time, my role transitioned into doing full stack work and even robotics work. Prior to working there, I had zero experience working on the front end side, but over time, I got to learn JavaScript, React, Redux, Node.js, Feathers.js, a bunch of other stuff. And then before that, I had never touched anything robotics before, and it was really cool because I got to work with a lot of hardware that was somewhat expensive, and obviously there's no way I could afford that stuff beforehand. If I had gone to a big company out of college, I likely would not have been given the opportunity to do anything outside of what I was initially hired to do. And this makes a lot of sense if you think about it. At big companies, they have so much money that they can hire for every single role 10 times over if they really wanted to. Any role that you take at a big company, you're likely going to be pigeonholed into doing that one thing. Pro number 3 is you can climb to higher level positions quicker than at a big company. Working at a startup, your contributions are going to make a huge impact on the company's success. So it's no surprise that if you are doing good work, that hard work will usually be seen when there are less amount of people working there, and you'll be promoted to higher and higher positions. And with each higher position, this likely comes with, more responsibility, but more pay on top of that. And this really can only benefit your career moving forward. At a large company, you kind of are a small fish in a big pond, and your contributions may not be seen as easily. Now, I'm not saying that if you work at a big company, you're not going to get promoted or anything like that. Of course you will. All of those companies are great, but I would argue that you definitely have more competition. Pro number 4 is you can help define the standards. Now, this pro kind of goes hand in hand with building things from the ground up. Typically in a startup, there may be certain standards that have not been put in place because no one has taken the initiative on it. Well, in that case, you can take the initiative to put these standards in place. So for example, let's say you join the company and you notice that there's no coding guidelines, or maybe your team doesn't do any code reviews. Whatever it is, you can take the initiative to improve those standards, and that way the next time someone is onboarded, they will have an easier time. And this pro supports the claim of climbing to higher positions quicker, because if you are defining standards, that's usually going to be looked at, in a really high regard, and I'm sure that won't go unnoticed. Typically, somebody who is defining standards in an organization, they are probably more senior, but if you can take on that role, that could mean you climbing to a higher position. Pro number 5 is you can expand your soft skills. And I know you might be thinking, well, I can expand my soft skills anywhere I go, which definitely is true. But at a startup, you're likely going to get to know every single person at the company. These people could be other engineers, HR people, sales, investors, and maybe even the CEO. I see this as a huge pro because you're likely going to be talking to people that don't do what you do, and that will definitely improve your communication skills. At a big company, you're likely only going to have to talk to people inside your team. But if you work at a startup, you're probably going to be interacting with every single department. If you work at a big company, I'm not saying it's not possible that you would, make friends with salespeople or HR people. I'm just saying that there is just such a huge group of people working at these companies that you're likely only going to have the chance to get to know people in the engineering organization. At my old job, I was taken into sales meetings and even gave demos to investors. And doing those things taught me how to talk to non-technical people about technical things without using any complicated jargon. Pro number 6 is you will likely have a shorter or no commute. This is something not many people think about when they get their first job in the software engineering field. There are a lot more startups than there are established big companies. I know that's pretty obvious. With that in mind, if you work at a startup, you likely have a better opportunity to work in an area that's not so densely populated, or it might even be remote friendly. Maybe you aren't making as much money at a startup, but this could mean you get to live in a lower cost of living area. You don't have to, pay money on gas, different car expenses. These are things that you should definitely think about if you have, multiple offers and you're trying to determine which one you should take. Big companies are usually in very high cost of living areas, right, dead center in some big city. This is just something to think about when you do take a job. Think about the amount of travel that you're going to have to do. I ended up commuting for over 2 years and it was awful. So take it from my experience. Definitely weigh all of your options. Hey, you. Yeah, you should like and subscribe and check out this video. You might like it. Or check out this one. This one's also cool.